All right, welcome back. In our next video here, we're talking about Scrum Principles. Todd's going to walk us through empiricism. We like to start with definitions and then work into practical application. So, Todd, how would you define empiricism?
Yeah, if you watched our video on complexity, one of the things we talked about is how, and when you're working in a complex domain, which Scrum is meant for, right? Scrum is a framework meant for solving complex adaptive problems, that you need to take an empirical approach for that. But what's empiricism mean? Hopefully no one is asleep during already with that word, but in order to take an empirical approach, to be empirical means that we are going to be guided by our experience, right? We're going to be guided by our experience. And so we like to set up that definition first. And in order to be guided by our experience, there's three particular things that need to happen, Ryan, right? We have three pillars of empiricism, starting with
Transparency. And so transparency does not mean visible. And that's a huge myth, a huge misunderstanding in the Scrum community. Transparency means well understood.
Mm-hmm.
And so you'll find many of the Scrum events, many of our practices, many of the things that we try to do, especially in the Scrum Master product, and I would say all three accountabilities, is to make our work well understood. Because if our work is well understood, if it has that high level of transparency, it means that people can do what, Todd?
They can inspect.
Yeah.
So inspect, Ryan, you're talking about how it's well understood. So we could be walking along, guided by our experiencing, making things well understood, but what good is it unless we're inspecting, which means we're going to look inward.
Exactly.
Look inward. And that doesn't just mean talking about people and adapting on that. That means product. That means people. That means your approach technically. It means everything as it relates to a product that we're going to look inward at. And luckily for us, the Scrum events give us plenty of opportunity to inspect.
Yeah. And so what this does, it explicitly makes it okay to check our work as we go along. In fact, it's necessary to be successful with Scrum. Final step here. So we have well understood work. We've looked inward. We've checked our work. We're seeing how things are going. Adaptation.
Mm-hmm.
We have to change based off of what we learn, right? And so this means it is okay to change your mind. Can you believe it? Right? It's actually okay to sometimes be wrong. And in fact, as human beings, we're going to be wrong quite often. But the more we keep our work well understood, the more we look inward and check our work, the more often we actually have the opportunity to change our mind, to make new and better decisions over and over and over again. Todd and I actually believe that's one of the core purposes of Agile, and more specifically the Scrum Framework, to create opportunities repeatedly to make new and better decisions, right? Otherwise, what good is the information? What good is the data?
Yeah, and one of the most beautiful things about Scrum here, Ryan, right, is that all of this is enabled by the Scrum framework in one calendar month or less, right? And that is in something that we're going to get to called a sprint. But in order for these three principles to happen, these three pillars to happen, right? So these are all the Scrum principles. The three pillars are transparency, inspection, and adaptation. There absolutely has to be trust. Trust within the team in and of itself, trust with the team and the organization, trust with customers. So in order for these three things to be enabled, there has to be trust.
What happens when trust is not present? When the base of this of the pillars is absent, work is not well understood, the inspections are not looking at real things, and the adaptations do not solve problems. Right? We have to be willing to look clearly and honestly at situations, at problems at work, and so that things are well understood, we can check our work and we can change our mind. Last comment on this before we wrap up this video: adaptation is often one of the most difficult sections. Actually, Todd is well known for saying that failure to adapt will likely be the biggest problem for an organization and Scrum team. So watch for that. This is a really big area where problems creep in.
Failure to adapt. Yeah. It is the silent killer of everything that's happening. But this is the way that we've always done everything. We're successful because of the way that we've been operating for 50 years. Failure to adapt, right? That's the number one thing that we see that hurts Scrum implementations in organizations.
All right, for your homework, right? After this,
More homework.
after this discussion, I know it's like we're the teacher nobody likes. Which pillar is the strongest in your organization? So right now, which one do you think your organization is excellent at? Is it transparency? Is it inspection? Is it adaptation? And then which one could use some repair? Let us know in the community. We can't wait to see what you come up with. And who knows, perhaps a fellow classmate might have some ideas on how to do things just a little bit better for you and your organization. So do that homework, leave your answers, and we will see you in the next video.